Sure.
That's how they get another degree in
You
computers,
did
right?
fine.
I'm waiting for Ken to come back, so there you are. Thank you, Ken, for all your efforts for this, and especially for getting those Dutch windmill cookies. I think everybody likes that. And good afternoon to all of you.
That's next Susan Marie. She's one of the three kids of 5 Dutch Days. She runs the Diamond Farmhouse in Northern.
Good for her. Well, let me pick up where Diana left off. Can you hear me?
Yes.
In thinking about the many contributions that archaeology can make to a new narrative of New Netherland, I decided to focus on 2 Indian archaeological sites, Fort Massapequa in Muncie, Delaware country, and Freeman in Mohawk Iroquois country. Wish me luck. I'm such a techno-plus. I'm doing this because people sometimes forget how strong a presence Indians were in the colony and the vital role they played. Indians are often seen today as shadowy fur traders lurking in the forests, savages, noble or otherwise, victims, or a people sadly on the way to extinction. They were none of these, and the Dutch certainly knew it. In reconsidering New Netherland from this archaeological perspective, the view from these Indian sites, what I see, and I hope you will see, are the entangled lives and necessary political alliances of some of the peoples who made up New Netherland. A quick introduction. The Mohawk were an Iroquoian people, the easternmost, if you look on the map, the easternmost of the 5 nations. They lived in large, densely populated villages. Their villages were often fortified and were surrounded by large fields of corn, beans, and squash. The Muncie were a coastal and riverine people. Speaking Algonquian language, they were part of the larger Delaware group, as you can see on the slide. They lived around here. And they lived in small, loosely structured, independent villages with a mixed economy of hunting, fishing, especially in the incredibly rich riverine and coastal resource areas here. And they had small gardens of maize, beans, and squash. Earlier colonial historians have argued that the Mohawk were the valuable Indians. They had access to the rich hunting territories to secure beaver for the all-important fur trade. Since beaver was soon hunted out of this area, the Muncie area, they became, according to these historians, the expendable Indians. And since they lived in close proximity to the Europeans, their interactions were frequently mutually destructive, and consequently, that conventional wisdom meant they were also seen as the subjugated Indians. And since today we all know how the story ends, it's a reasonable hypothesis. But recently, some scholars and archaeologists among them are beginning to rethink that. It's just not that simple. Remember, back in the 17th century, nobody knew how the story was going to end. And they all acted accordingly, each group striving for a future that they thought was within reach. The native groups that I'm talking about were at times valuable to the Dutch, as the Dutch at times were valuable to them. There was much more going on in New Netherland than a narrow focus on the fur trade, especially in later years when it became a settler colony. Fur trading partners were important, but so are political ones. These 2 sites, Massapequa and Freeman, I think, underline all of this. And more importantly, they also lead us to think about not just Dutch history or just Indian history, but instead about a joint history, one that tells us of the times when the lives of these very different people were entwined, when they needed each other and had to make necessary alliances. To be sure, the Indians and the Dutch did lead very separate lives, as did the Africans, but not in all ways. And it's in those entanglements, these important, necessary, cooperative ventures that I'd like to talk about today. And I should add that although I'm talking about cooperation, I'm certainly not talking in kumbaya. The people probably just plain didn't like each other, and were probably simply looking after their own interests. There were saints and sinners on every side, and many people were a mixture of both. All of them were people of their time and culture, and many of them on every side paid very dearly for these encounters. But that discussion is for another time. Since Collegiate Church is giving a ceremony of reconciliation, and today's focus on alliances and entanglements is geared towards that end. I should also add that not only do I not understand computers, I also don't speak Dutch or any Iroquois or Algonquian languages. I apologize in advance for my many mispronunciations. I take comfort in the fact that in the original Dutch days, Algonquians, Iroquoians, Europeans, and Africans probably all mispronounced each other's names. Okay, let's begin. Look, maybe. Oh, that's the slide I wanted to show you when I was talking about cooperation. Well, as I said, I don't know computers.
The machine wasn't cooperative.
Okay. You're always so right. Let's begin on August 30th, 1645, a famous day of alliances and entanglements. This is a 19th century fantasy of the signing of the treaty that ended Keith's War, a bloody war that ravaged the coastal region named for the unpopular Willem Keith, director of the West India Company, who was blamed for it. It was signed under the blue canopy of heaven at Fort Amsterdam in the presence of the entire community of New Amsterdam, a number of Mohawk dignitaries, including Sisiadego, who helped mediate the treaty, and representatives from several Algonquian groups who fought in the war, including Mayachumanen at the Long Island sachem or chief of a very powerful family. At the signing, the Algonquians and the Dutch agreed to a firm peace which neither side would ever break. So let's follow the fortunes of these three groups and see what happened. To begin, in 1647, Keith was replaced by Peter Stuyvesant. Subsequently, Mayachumanen, who was now known as Takapusha, sachem of the Massapequa and chief sachem of the Western Long Island Indians, began professing his friendship and desires for peace to Stuyvesant, often coming himself to the port or sending an emissary with gifts of wampum, the shell beads that had both ritual and economic importance. In fact, in November of 1655, 2 months after the Peach War, a conflict where some Indian groups attacked the Dutch around New Netherland, Adam, one of his spokesmen, came to the fort and reminded Stuyvesant of their friendship, professed innocence of any actions in the Peace War, and noted that Takapusha was in fact on bad terms with the Indians who had attacked Fort Amsterdam. Adam also reminded Stuyvesant that all he had to do was summon Takapusha's people, and they would be ready to help. Very astute. In the aftermath of the Peach War, both Stuyvesant and Takapusha may have wanted supporters. Takapusha clearly wanted a Dutch alliance. He was boxed in between the English and their Indian allies just to his east and the Dutch to his west. Furthermore, he did not trust mainland Indians and also had ongoing problems with the English at Hempstead. But he was a shrewd politician. He visited Stuyvesant, sent presents, offered help. He threw his lot in with the Dutch. But Stuyvesant also wanted allies to help him with other Indian groups and with the English. Perhaps in return for Takapusha's diplomatic overtures and maybe to ensure his future help, Stuyvesant in March 1656 promised that in 6 months he would build a house or fort stocked with, quote, Indian trade or commodities. And Takapusha vowed that he, quote, would live in peace with the Dutch and English within the jurisdiction of New Netherland. Takapusha kept his word of the bargain, but was never certain whether or not Stuyvesant did. The documents don't say, but as Diana pointed out, the documents don't tell us everything.